How's it going? This is Phil. I'm excited to talk with you about how to buy your first trad rack. So first of all, I want to talk about the different pieces of gear, what they're called, how much they cost, and then at the end we'll wrap up with the total cost of your first trad rack. So one of the things that I want to clarify is that trad climbing, when we're talking about trad climbing, we're talking about gear that we place when we're leading on rock. We place that gear ourselves, and then we clip the rope to that piece of gear as protection. And then usually our friend follows behind us, our partner, and cleans out the gear as they come behind us. It means that there's no scars left in the rock, there's no damage done to the rock. So oftentimes this is called clean climbing, or we sometimes call trad gear removable gear, because trad climbing at one point in history also included pitons, which were metal blades that we pounded into the rock with a hammer. We are not talking about that here. We're just talking about clean climbing, removable gear. And I want to start with the most simple piece of removable gear, which is a sling. This is often forgotten about. It's not the sexiest type of gear. It's just a 4-foot sewn sling, and you can use this sling to attach yourself to a horn. You could also use this with a rock chalk. So if a rock is stuck in a crack and it's wedged in there really tight, you could wrap the sling around there and you could clip yourself to that. I've used it on a route called the 3-tree route, just slinging a tree and then clipping my rope to that sling as I go up, so that tree is protecting me. I've also used it on chicken heads. So a chicken head is just a rock that sticks up and then has a wider top. So you can just take your sling and wrap it around there. And I'll show that on another video. So a sling costs, $4 to $6, fairly inexpensive. You're going to need probably at least 5 slings. That's about $20 of slings. The next thing you need is a cordelette. Cordelette is a 20-foot piece of rope that's about 6 millimeters thick. 7 millimeters is super safe. 6 millimeters is adequate. This is a 6 millimeter cordelette that's 20 feet long. These cost about $18, and you need 2 of these. So you need them to build anchors. So if you're going to do multi-pitch trad climbing, you need 2 cordelettes. Of course, you're going to need a handful of locking carabiners. You might have those already from sport climbing. So we have 2 big categories of gear when we're talking about trad gear. We have passive gear and we have active gear. So passive gear just simply means that it's gear that's going to fit into a constriction in the rock. The shape of the gear and the shape of the rock cause the holding power. So the classic example is what we call a wedge. This happens to be a DMM walnut. You can see the shape of it. So if I fit it into the wedge of a rock, it's going to fit in there, and that's going to create the holding power. So you have the DMM walnut, you have a black diamond stopper. This is a DMM offset walnut. You can see the shape is a little bit different than the regular DMM walnut. And so those pieces of gear all fit into the category of wedges. They're also passive gear. So hexes are passive gear. Hexes are a great lightweight piece of equipment that's kind of gone out of vogue, but these can fit into wider cracks. They can be fit widthwise or lengthwise into a crack, and they're very inexpensive, and they are lightweight and durable. So a set of hexes usually costs about $90. That's what you want to buy. You want to buy 1 set of hexes for your first rack. On the wedges, I would recommend the DMM walnuts, sizes 7 through 11. Those cost about $45, so 2 sets of those are $90. And then the final piece of gear that's I would recommend for passive gear are tri-cams. They can be placed passively or actively, and 4 of those they're from the company called Camp. 4 of those cost $90. Now when we move over to active gear, the first thing we usually think about or what we call cams, or spring-loaded camming devices. So spring-loaded camming devices, like this one here, is a number 1 Black Diamond Camelot. The spring-loaded camming devices revolutionized climbing. Ray Jardine in 1978 made the cam called the Friend, which I love that name. It was a rigid stem. So this one here that I'm showing you has a flexible stem, so it flexes. The one that he made had a steel stem, and it was a little bit problematic because if you put it into a horizontal crack, so if you place this into a horizontal crack, this stem would flex, but Ray Jardine's stem was rigid, so it actually breaks sometimes. So I would buy a flexible stem cam, and you can either get the Black Diamond Camelots, which is a single stem. Your thumb goes down here, and you have your 2 fingers on the trigger. This is the trigger here. Or you can buy something like this from Metolius. Metolius makes this U-shaped stem, which just gives you a little bit different feel because you can have just 2 fingers. 1 finger's on the trigger, 1 finger's in the back of the stem. I would recommend buying the Black Diamond Camelots. This is a number 1, but I'd start with a .75 and go up to a number 3. That's going to cost you about $430 for those cams. That's a big expense, but they allow you to climb cracks that are parallel. So the advantage of the passive gear is there's no moving parts, but you have to fit them into wedges. You have to fit them into constrictions in the rock. And for cams, you can fit them into a parallel crack. The next thing you need to look at buying is an alpine draw. So this is an alpine draw. It's 2 carabiners with a 2-foot sling, and these cost you about $10 a piece. And you need at least 12 of those. That's about $120 for your alpine draws. The alpine draws give you the huge advantage of being able to decrease rope drag. So if the rock climbing route meanders a little bit, you can add the 2-foot sling to it and it keeps the rope straight. Or if there's a big roof, you can add the alpine draw and that allows the rope to come out away from the rock so it's not getting caught on the edge of the roof. So the alpine draw is a little bit more flexible than what we typically think of a sports draw or a quick draw. Forgot to mention that the other thing to think about, but not for your first rack probably, is the 3 cam units, TCUs. So this is a 3 cam unit. So it's a spring-loaded camming device, but it only has 3 lobes versus most spring-loaded camming devices have 4 lobes. The advantage of the spring-loaded camming device is that it goes into a parallel crack, but one disadvantage is that it can walk. So that means the lobes are actually moving back and forth. They can walk back into the crack. And if the crack is flared in the back, it would open up and then it won't hold you if you fall. One advantage of the 3-lobed cam is that it doesn't typically walk backwards. It could walk out, which would also be a bad thing. But if it's placed correctly, the 3-lobed cam can be used in places where the 4-lobed cam can't be used. I look to buy the 3-lobed cam or the 3 cam unit, TCU, later on if you need that for the area that you're most climbing in. You also need a nut tool. So the nut tool, this is one by Gravel. Black Diamond makes one. They're about $15. You need the nut tool to be able to remove gear that's stuck in the rock. So you have to have that so you don't lose your gear. The final thing you need is the actual gear sling. So here's one that has loops. I really like the loops because it allows you to organize the gear when you're climbing. Some people are trad climbing without a gear sling and they put the gear all in their harness. The disadvantage of that is that if you do multi-pitch climbing and your partner comes up to you and then they want to climb the next pitch, they want to lead the next pitch, you have to hand over all of that gear one by one. There's a chance you drop it. Of course, if you have it on the gear sling, you can just hand over all the gear to your partner. You just got to be very careful not to drop it. So just reviewing what we've learned, we talked about trad gear versus removable gear or clean gear. Those are terms that are interchanged. A trad rack typically these days means a rack that has gear that is removable, that doesn't leave any damage in the rock. You have passive gear, you have active gear. You have slings, things that you can use that are very lightweight and inexpensive to help you stay safe when you're trad climbing. And then the total cost is about $1,000 for your first rack. And I know it's a big outlay of money when you start off, but this equipment is well built and it'll last you a long time and give you lots of fun and enjoyment and adventure. Thanks a lot and have a great day.